shadows beckon. What does the shadow will? As the shadow wills, let darkness guide me, intriguing for the Lich King. As the shadow wills, let darkness guide me, intriguing. Let darkness guide me, none shall survive. Tremble before the scourge. Die for the Lich King. None shall survive. Intrigue for the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. Intriguing as the shadow wills. For the Lich King. As the shadow wills. King. Tremble before the scourge. Intriguing for the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. None shall survive. As the shadow wills. Intriguing as the shadow wills. For the Lich King. This better be good. Let darkness guide me, as the shadow wills. Let darkness guide me, intrigue, as the shadow wills. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me, as the shadow wills. Tremble before the scourge. Let darkness guide me, as the shadow wills. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me, as the shadow wills. Let darkness guide me. Intrigue. None shall survive. Let darkness guide me. Intrigue. As the shadow wills. Die for the Lich King. Intrigue for the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. None shall survive. For the Lich King. Intrigue. Die for the Lich King. Intrigue. Let darkness guide me. Intriguing as the shadow wills. What does the shadow will? The restless dead await for the Lich King as the shadow wills. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. Intriguing as the shadow wills. For the Lich King. Intriguing. Let darkness guide me. Intriguing as the shadow wills. Intriguing. Let darkness guide me. Intriguing. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me, as the shadow wills. Intriguing. Let darkness guide me, for the Lich King. As the shadow wills. Intriguing. For the Lich King. Intriguing. Let darkness guide me, for the Lich King. As the shadow wills. For the Lich King. None shall survive, as the shadow wills. Tremble before the scourge.
None shall survive.
For the Lich King.
Let darkness guide me.
As the shadow wills.
For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. In truth.
For the Lich King. As the shadow wills.
Let darkness guide me.
Intriguing. As the shadow wills.
For the Lich King.
As the shadow wills. Intriguing. As the shadow wills.
For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King.
As the shadow wills.
Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King.
Intriguing.
For the Lich King.
The shadows beckon.
Let darkness guide me.
As the shadow wills.
For the Lich King.
The dead shall serve.
Yes, me
This
lord.
good. The dead shall serve.
Let darkness guide me.
Intriguing. As the shadow wills.
For the Lich King.
Intriguing.
For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me.
As the shadow wills.
Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King.
Intriguing. As the shadow wills.
For the Lich King.
As the shadow wills.
Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King.
Die! Intriguing.
None shall survive.
As the shadow wills.
Die! For the Lich King.
Intriguing. As the shadow wills.
Let darkness guide me.
As the shadow wills.
Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King.
As the shadow wills.
Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King.
As the shadow wills.
For the Lich King.
Intriguing.
For the Lich King.
As the shadow wills. Tremble before the scourge.
Let darkness guide me.
What does the shadow will? The restless dead await. What does the shadow will? Intriguing. As the shadow wills.
For the Lich King.
Intriguing.
Let darkness guide me.
Intriguing.
For the Lich King.
Intriguing.
For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me.
Intriguing. As the shadow wills.
Let darkness guide me.
Intriguing. The restless dead await.
Let darkness guide me.
Intriguing.
Let darkness guide me.
Intriguing. As the shadow wills. Intriguing. As the shadow wills.
Intriguing.
As the shadow wills.
Let darkness guide me. Intriguing.
As the shadow wills.
The dead shall serve.
This better be good.
Let darkness guide me. Die. Intriguing. For the Lich King.
As the shadow wills.
None shall survive. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. Intriguing.
As the shadow wills.
Intriguing.
The restless dead await.
Die. For the Lich King.
As the shadow wills.
For the Lich King.
As the shadow wills. Tremble before the scourge.
Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King.
As the shadow wills.
For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. Intriguing. Die.
As the shadow wills.
Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. Intriguing. Let darkness guide me.
As the shadow wills.
Intriguing. For the Lich King.
As the shadow wills.
Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King.
As the shadow wills.
Let darkness guide me. Intriguing.
This better be good. What does the shadow will?
Let darkness guide me. Intriguing.
This better be good. As the shadow will.
Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. Intriguing.
As the shadow wills.
Intriguing.
Tremble before the scourge.
Die. Let darkness guide me. Intriguing.
Tremble before the scourge.
For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me.
As the shadow wills.
Die. Let darkness guide me.
As the shadow wills.
Intriguing.
As the shadow wills.
Intriguing. For the Lich King.
As the shadow wills.
Let darkness guide me.
The dead shall serve.
Intriguing. For the Lich King. Intriguing. For the Lich King.
The restless dead await.
The shadows beckon. Intriguing.
This better be good.
The dead shall serve.
The restless dead await.
The dead shall serve.
What does the will? This good. What does the shadow will?
The dead shall serve. What does the shadow will? For the Lich King. Intruder. As the shadow will.
Tremble before the scourge.
For the Lich King. Let darkness guide. As the shadow will. Shall survive. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide you. As the shadow will. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide you. For the Lich King. More work? The restless dead await. Intrigue. For the Lich King. As the shadow will. Let darkness guide you. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide you. As the shadow wills. Let darkness guide you. Intrigue.
Tremble before the scourge.
Let darkness guide you. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide you. As the shadow wills. Let darkness guide me. As the shadow wills. Won't work. What does the shadow will? Let darkness guide. What is it? The restless dead wait for the Lich King. As the shadow wills. Intrude. Let darkness guide. Kill me fine. This better. The restless dead wait as the shadow wills. The dead shall serve. This better be good. Let darkness guide you. For the Lich King. As the shadow will. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide. As the shadow will. Let darkness guide you. Intrude. For the Lich King. As the shadow will. For the Lich King. Intriguing. As the shadow wills. For the Lich King. Intriguing. Let darkness guide me. As the shadow wills. Intriguing. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. As the shadow wills. Let darkness guide me. Intriguing. As the shadow wills. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. What does the shadow will? As the shadow wills. For the Lich King. As the shadow wills. Let darkness guide me. The restless dead await. The dead shall serve. As the shadow wills. None shall survive. Let darkness guide me. The restless dead await. Intriguing. Die. As the shadow wills. For the Lich King. shadows beckon. Let darkness guide. As the shadow wills. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. Intrigue. As the shadow wills. For the Lich King. What does the shadow will? Let darkness guide me. Intrigue. Let darkness guide me. As the shadow wills. Let darkness guide me. Intriguing. For the Lich King. None shall survive. Let darkness guide me. Intriguing. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. Intriguing. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. Intriguing. Let darkness guide me. Intriguing. As the shadow wills. Let darkness guide me. As the shadow wills. Intriguing. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. As the shadow wills. For the Lich King. Intriguing. For the Lich King. As the shadow wills. Shadows beckon. Let darkness guide me. The restless dead await. This better be good. What does the shadow will? As the shadow wills. Let darkness guide me. Intriguing. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. The restless dead await. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. Intrigue. For the Lich King. Die. As the shadow wills. Let darkness guide me. This battle. Intrigue. Let darkness guide me. Tremble before the scourge! What? Intrigue. Let darkness guide me. Intrigue. For the Lich King. The dead shall serve. What does the shadow do? As the shadow wills. Intrigue. The dead shall serve. Let darkness guide me. As the shadow wills. What does the shadow will? Let darkness guide me. The restless dead await. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. Intrigue. Let darkness guide me. Intrigue. As the shadow wills. Let darkness guide me. Intrigue. As the shadow wills. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. As the shadow wills. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me.
As the shadow wills. What does the shadow will? For the Lich King. The restless dead await. As the shadow wills. Let darkness guide me. They'll all be mine. This. What does the shadow will? For the Lich King. Let darkness guide.
What is it?
As the shadow wills, the dead shall serve. Intriguing. For the Lich King. As the shadow wills, for the Lich King. Let darkness guide. None shall survive. As the shadow wills, let darkness guide. What does the shadow will? For the Lich King. Die! As the shadow will. For the Lich King. As the shadow will. For the Lich King. As the shadow will.
Forward! Yes, me lord. Righto.
The dead shall serve.
What? Oh,
The restless dead await.
What is it?
The dead shall serve.
Tremble before the scourge.
For the Lich King. Intriguing. As the shadow will. For the Lich King. Intriguing. For the Lich King.
Forward!
This better be good. As the shadow wills. For the Lich King. As the shadow wills. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. As the shadow wills. For the Lich King. Intriguing. For the Lich King. Intriguing. Let darkness guide me. What does the shadow will? For the Lich King. As the shadow wills.
What?
This better be good.
What is it?
The dead shall
What?
serve.
Yes,
This
me lord.
better be good. Intriguing. Let darkness guide me. The restless dead wait. This better be good. As the shadow wills. The dead shall serve. Let darkness guide me. Intriguing. Darkness guide me. They'll all be mine. As the shadow wills. Intriguing. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. Intriguing. None shall survive. As the shadow wills. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. This better. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. Intriguing. As the shadow wills. What does the shadow will? Intriguing.
Forward!
The restless dead await. This better be good. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me.
Tremble before the scourge.
The dead shall serve.
As the shadow wills. For the Lich King. This better be good. Let darkness guide.
What does the shadow will?
For the Lich King. As the shadow wills. The dead shall serve. For the Lich King. As the shadow wills. Let darkness guide. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King.
What is it?
What does the shadow will? As the shadow wills. None shall survive. Intrigue. For the Lich King. As the shadow wills.
Yes, me lord. Off I go then. Righto. All right. Righto.
The shadows beckon. Darkness guide me.
Yes, me lord.
The restless dead await. As the shadow wills. Let darkness guide me.
What does the shadow will?
What is it?
As the shadow wills. Intrigue. Let darkness guide me. As the shadow wills. For the Lich King. This better be good. The shadows beckon. As the shadow wills.
What is it? Yes, me lord.
What does the shadow will? Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. As the shadow wills. Intruder. As the shadow wills. Intruder. As the shadow wills. Let darkness guide me. Intriguing. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. As the shadow wills.
What is it?
This better be good.
Yes, me lord.
Intrigue. The dead shall serve. Let darkness guide me. As the shadow wills. Let darkness
Forward.
guide me. As the shadow wills. For the Lich King.
Yes, me
The
lord.
restless dead await. Let darkness guide me. Intrigue. Let darkness guide me.
Is it?
The shadows beckon. They'll all be mine. As the shadow wills. Let darkness guide me. As the shadow wills. This better be for the Lich King. Let darkness guide me.
What? Off I go then. Yes, me lord. All right.
For the Lich King. As the shadow wills. Intrigue. As the shadow wills. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. Tremble before the scourge. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. As the shadow wills. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. Intrigue. Let darkness guide me. Intrigue. For the Lich King. Intrigue. As the shadow wills. For the Lich King. As the shadow wills. Let darkness guide me. As the shadow wills. Let darkness guide me. Retreat. As the shadow wills. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. As the shadow wills. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. For the Lich King. Let darkness guide me. Retreat. Let darkness guide me.